Think about your favorite song or album. When you close your eyes and hear each of the songs, what do you see? Do you visualize a story or maybe even a memory while you listen along? Storytelling is a process that can transcend the need for words and dialogue, and one medium of storytelling that people may not consider is through music. And I believe that Chrono Cross is one of the few video games that effectively tell its story through its soundtrack. In this video, I'll attempt to analyze both the composition and utilization of Chrono Cross's soundtrack in the context of the narrative, as well as give some background on its composer Yasunori Mitsuda. And for those of you who haven't played Chrono Cross yet, this video will only cover the first hour of the game, so don't worry about any major spoilers. Chrono Cross is the sequel to the critically acclaimed jrpg Chrono Trigger, and to an extent a continuation of the Satellaview exclusive visual novel Radical Dreamers. Chrono Cross, both narratively and tonally, is a much heavier game when compared to the more lighthearted Chrono Trigger. This tonal and thematic shift between games is reflected masterfully throughout the soundtrack. Chrono Cross's soundtrack was composed over the course of half a year around 1999 by Yasunori Mitsuda, following his work on Chrono Trigger, Radical Dreamers, and Xenogears. Many songs from both Chrono Trigger and Radical Dreamers were repurposed to be used in Chrono Cross's soundtrack. A little over half of Radical Dreamers' compositions were remade into full tracks for Chrono Cross's soundtrack, while a few Chrono Trigger compositions were used as leitmotifs. The utilization and recontextualization of these songs helped thematically link all the games together. And yes, Chrono Cross is a sequel to Chrono Trigger before anybody says otherwise. According to a 2003 interview conducted by Game Hyu, Yasunori Mitsuda's musical influences at the time included traditional folk, rock, pop, and jazz. Mitsuda cited some of his artistic influences, which include Art Blakey, The Ventures, The Carpenters, Tchaikovsky, Holst, and Maurice Ravel. In relation to Chrono Cross, it's important to note that Mitsuda specifically mentioned Maurice Ravel's influence on his music in a tier of his own. Mitsuda states that he'd been a big fan of world music, which is apparent when listening to Chrono Cross's soundtrack, as the game takes place in a tropical and diverse archipelago. I wanted to take time out of this video to specifically mention his influences because video game composers rarely do this, so if you enjoy the music of Chrono Cross, you should definitely check out the artists I just mentioned. The story of Chrono Cross begins with a boy named Serge who lives in the seaside fishing village of Arni. It's important to note that Serge, like Chrono before him, is a silent protagonist. Because of this decision, there's very little room for Serge to express himself throughout the events of this very personal journey. Chrono Cross's soundtrack serves as a proxy for Serge's dialogue and is a reflection of his emotions throughout the story. Serge's home of Arni Village is a peaceful location, and the soundtrack reflects the easygoing and slow nature of the area, with the utilization of a slower tempo in the guitar and flute. I've always thought that it wouldn't be out of place for this track to be diegetic. Similar to the opening of Chrono Trigger, Chrono Cross follows its protagonist navigating his everyday life as normal. Everything is as it should be, and life is good. Shortly after the game begins, Serge is allowed to leave Arni Village and access the world map. The setting of Chrono Cross takes place on a tropical archipelago called El Nido, and the track Fields of Time, Homeworld reflects the vibrant setting and Serge's mood wonderfully. Prior to entering the world map, Serge was asked to do a favor by his love interest, Lena. This track, in my eyes, shows Serge's optimism and determination to do his best for Lena. Fields of Time, Homeworld is an upbeat rendition of Chrono Trigger's main theme, Chrono Trigger. This hints that Chrono Cross is connected to Chrono Trigger in a way. This track utilizes steel drums and a synthesized guitar to reflect the tropical and vibrant environment of El Nido, and is also a demonstration of Mitsuda's world music influence. Opassa Beach is where Serge and Lena meet to talk with one another about life. This is one of the numerous areas in the game where there's absolutely no music. Instead, the environmental sound of the waves and seagulls are the only thing the player hears. This is an aspect of Chrono Cross that I've always appreciated. The game's not afraid to let the scenery stand on its own without music having to always accompany it. They could have easily added a number of great tracks to many scenes in this game, but they chose not to, and I really appreciate that. Once Lena enters the scene to talk with Serge about their childhood, the track Reminiscing Unerasable Memory plays over the sound of waves on the ocean. This song is a major tonal shift when compared to the two tracks the player has heard before, and it gives a glimpse into the nostalgic and even lonely nature of what will eventually build up to become Chrono Cross's major thematic focus. Shortly after his conversation with Lena, Serge stares off into the ocean. He suddenly has a vision of children laughing and playing on the beach and then a panther's eye. An aura surrounds him, and he ends up passing out in the sand. An old man wakes up Serge on Opassa Beach, with Lena nowhere to be found. The old man leaves, and Serge returns to Arni village to find her. Although the world map is visually exactly the same, something is completely different. The music. The world map theme is no longer an upbeat tropical rendition of Chrono Trigger that we once knew. Instead, it's a haunting, isolating, and even dreamlike track that sounds alien to the player by this point of the game. This track is Dream of the Shore Bordering Another World. While Chrono Trigger explored the concept of time travel across multiple timelines, Chrono Cross explores the concept of traveling between two parallel worlds, one being Serge's home world and the other being another world. The dichotomy between the home world tracks and the another world tracks in this game is day and night. The homeworld tracks throughout Chrono Cross's soundtrack are consistently upbeat, warm, cozy, and oftentimes relaxing, while the Another World tracks are dreamlike, cold, unfamiliar, lonely, and somber. Unlike Chrono Trigger, there is no visual indicator for which world you're in. The parallel worlds look exactly the same at first glance. Because of this, the distinct shift in tone found in the soundtrack between the two worlds is the one and only distinction the player can make of the world that you're navigating in at any given moment. This track represents the isolation and displacement that Serge feels upon being teleported to another world, especially after the following scene. Upon returning to Arni village, Serge finds that even though the people he grew up around are still there like normal, no one recognizes him. Serge enters his own home to find his mother isn't there and that someone completely different lives there now. The track Arni Village Another World is the same song as the homeworld version, but the song is played with a key lead and an airy synthesized pad rather than a guitar lead to represent the isolated feeling that Serge is experiencing. The home he once knew is no longer his own, and the people he knew and loved don't even recognize him and treat him as if he were a stranger. Serge finds Lena on the pier where the game started to discover that she too doesn't recognize him, even though they were just together moments prior. Lena claims that Serge looks like a boy that used to live next door to her, and explains that the boy died 10 years ago with his mother following soon after, and reveals that his name was also Serge. Lena directs Serge to go visit the boy's grave at Cape Howl to the west of Arni Village and says goodbye to the familiar stranger. The path leading to Cape Howl and Cape Howl itself are areas where there's once again no music. It's almost as if Serge himself is holding his breath anxiously in disbelief of his situation and the fear of learning the truth. Once Serge reaches the top of Cape Howl, he finds a grave and discovers in this world he died at 7 years old 10 years ago. Before he can even process what happened, 3 men and a mysterious girl appear before him, concluding the opening of the game. Chrono Cross's soundtrack consistently places the duality and tone of the game's theme on full display. It's my hope as a longtime fan of this game, its themes, and its soundtrack that more people will experience Chrono Cross with the remastered version dropping on April 8th. Which I can't believe I can actually say now, it's kinda crazy. For real though, I've been wanting to make this video since I was about 13 years old, so I hope I did it justice. I know I really enjoyed making it. And if you liked the video, give me all the good engagement stuff, so like, comment, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. And I'll see you next time.